We're going to talk to the opposition now. Home Office Minister, or Shadow Home Office Minister, Matt Vickers joins me now in the studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Listen, your reaction to those unemployment figures going up to 4.7% in the 3 months to May, ticking up 0.1% from the 3 months to April.
Well, it's 14% more people unemployed. I mean, that is horrendous. But we talk about numbers, but actually this is people's lives. This is people who aren't able to have the comfort of coming home with a pay packet, who want to be able to, aspire and be ambitious and deliver on what they want to achieve in life. And now they can't. They're going on to the scrap heap of welfare, which also costs the taxpayer. And it doesn't happen by accident. Every Labour government in history has left office with more people unemployed. And the reason for that is, at the moment, it's that jobs tax, those national insurance increases, it's that employment rights bill that's coming down the line, it's the changes to small business rates relief for leisure, hospitality and retail, real consequences for businesses, the grafters, the people who create these jobs, are all being absolutely battered by this government, and that's the consequence. More people out of work.
You call them the grafters, but the employment rights bill is to protect employees. That's what Labour would say. Those grafters need protecting from unscrupulous employers.
There is a balance. I mean, you've seen this ridiculous banter ban where the people who own a bar, the landlord is going to be responsible if their staff are offended as a result of something else somebody says in the bar. That's ridiculous. It's completely... This is Labour in the hands of their union paymasters and responding accordingly.
Yeah, you talk about banter. You look at what's been said on MasterChef, for example, and that's what they're trying to stop, that kind of thing in people's workplaces.
Yeah, but it's going too far. If people go down the pub to have a chat, they go down to say what's on their mind.
What, racial abuse, that kind of thing, that's fine, isn't it?
No, but having conversations that somebody can find offensive, that's the problem. That's the problem with the legislation, it's literally the banter ban. But the reality is, more people out of work, more people reliant upon the welfare system, real huge cost for taxpayers.
These are the highest figures since June 2021, and we know who was in government then. So what would you do differently this time round?
The pandemic, yeah. So we saw near record levels of employment under the Conservatives, actually. More people in work than ever before at points.
Tons of money spent on furlough as well, by the way.
There was, yeah, that was real. That was real. It was a pandemic that shut down our economy and had real consequences. But I think in reality, this is the result of what Labour are doing in office. Anybody who wants to create jobs, I mean, the hospitality sector, we've lost 69,000 jobs. The people who lose out are A, the employers who are having to shrink their business, can't create jobs, B, the people who would have took those jobs and now can't. And often that's the young person who's trying to get the first job, and the guy who runs that hospitality business, who's going to give that youngster his first shout, give them the first opportunity. That's down the drain. Those youngsters are missing out now.
But you look at pubs, and pubs have been on the slide for years across governments. You also look at something, you mentioned the pandemic, eat out to pay out costs an awful lot of money, which might be money better spent these days on employment.
Pubs have been on the slide, but like many things, they're on a much faster slide at the moment. 69,000 jobs since Labour announced the jobs tax. That has real consequences. That's the pub at the end of the road closing and all the jobs that were in it gone. That is horrendous and it has real consequences for the public.
Let's talk about the Afghan leak. We only learnt about it this week because the Labour government sought to get that super injunction lifted, of course, with many in the press as well. Which Conservative ministers do you think have questions to answer on using that? Ben Wallace, Grant Shapps, Rishi Sunak?
Yeah, so like you, I only know what I've read in the newspaper. I wasn't a minister in the last government, but my interpretation of that situation is it obviously has huge consequences for those people whose names were put forward and leaked. That data breach had consequences for them, and it also has huge consequences for the British taxpayer who are having to pick up the tab for this.
Yes, £7 billion.
It wasn't a politician that released it, but politicians should be held to account for what's gone on. But the reality is, whoever allowed that data breach to occur in the MOD is responsible. They should be held to account, and there should be, real consequences and sanctions for them. But the other thing we must do is ensure it can never happen again.
Is it really justified for a government minister, and I think it was Grant Shapps' name on this application, because in fairness to him, he inherited it from Ben Wallace when he became Defence Secretary, to use a super injunction to gag us in the press, to stop your voters, the people who put you in a job, from knowing what they're up to?
So I actually, as I've said, I only know what I've read, but my interpretation
you also heard my question, so is it right?
Yeah, so my interpretation of this from what I've read is that there was a balance to be had in whether this information is released or not. And at the time, the courts thought it shouldn't be released, because actually, if you tell the world that there is a list of names of people who helped the British services, you're probably highlighting the issue. You're putting them at greater risk, coupled with the fact that we've seen today lawsuits going on of people trying to sue people as a result. So actually, it becoming public also has a huge cost, and that's what they were trying to avoid. And in fact, I think the government were right to apologise. I think the opposition joined them in apologising. I think that is the right thing. We've now got to make sure that whatever comes next, it can never occur again.
Yeah, it's not people suing people, it's people suing the government because of decisions that were taken primarily by the Conservative government last time round.
It wasn't a decision to breach to have a data leak.
No, it was
That wasn't a decision.
It was a decision to cover up a mistake and use something as draconian as a super injunction.
I think it is wrong. I think that parliamentarians should have known in a way that they didn't know. You know, they never had access to this information to be able to scrutinise what had occurred. But I also think that as the courts were looking at and found, there was a balance as well in that you do not highlight that there is a... I mean, if my name was on a list like that, I wouldn't want it highlighted into the world if it was floating around on the internet somewhere and I was at risk. So I think there is a balance. We've got to get amongst the detail. We've got to look at it properly, review what's gone on, hold the right people to account, and there should be real consequences and sanctions for them, and learn the lesson so it can never happen again.
Look, this was all done by ministers of defence. It falls to them, Foreign Office, but the Home Office, and you're in the shadow Home Office effectively, the Home Office impact is one on immigration. Do you worry now that because of this happening, that potentially Afghans will be coming here who maybe didn't deserve the right in the first place?
I think if you did your bit for Britain, the people who put themselves in harm's way, at risk, to support the work of our British Armed Forces, then they do have a case.
So that should have been done sooner than those
forwards.
who... I mean, we hear from the likes of Johnny Mercer saying this should have been done years ago. Those who stepped up, especially Afghan Special Forces, I would think he worked alongside, should have been looked after by successive governments.
I think you had to look, and you had to look at the case that comes forwards for those individuals. We've seen, suggestions that some of these people shouldn't be here for certain reasons.
Yeah.
No evidence of that, actually, but I think you've got to look at each case and its own merits, and people who put themselves on the line to work with our armed forces should rightly be supported. Particularly, we've put them at risk as a result of a data breach.
Yes, look, you're following the round, doing Jess Phillips earlier on, of course, Home Office Minister too. They're investing in more this morning, or announcing they're investing more this morning to fight domestic abuse, something you'd welcome.
Yeah, absolutely so. I mean, the reality is that a lot of dealing with domestic abuse relies on the police forces involved having the resources they need.
Yeah, three of them are getting extra resources, I think, as a part of this.
Three of how many? Three is not very many, but actually, if the police officers aren't there, then you can't deal with some of the issues you've got to deal with. This government has slammed police forces with a national insurance increase. We've seen that the Met Police Force might lose as many as 1,700 police officers and staff. That is not the way forwards. That is not, keeping our streets safe should be a priority for this government. We're paying a hell of a lot in taxes. We need policemen on our streets.
Yes, it did hit record highs under the Conservatives, of course.
Record high numbers.
Tax burden.
Oh no, the number of police hit a record high. There were more police on the streets of Britain than ever before under the Conservatives.
I was referring to the tax burden, as I think you now realise.
Well, it's much higher now. It's much higher now than it was under the Conservatives already, and it's coming up again in November.
They pointed to that black hole that you left them with, which I know you will also.
There's more evidence of the
Loch
Ness Monster than there is of that black hole.
Some people believe in the Loch Ness Monster, you know that.
Well, some people believe Keir Starmer, or they did before they saw him in office.
Matt Vickers, thank you.